All right. Well, welcome to the second episode of Add Water and Stir with Complicated Melody and
Hey,
myself. Hey, and Adoptive Black Mom. And we're back. Look, we lasted for another week.
I know I'm proud of us for doing our second podcast. So,
Yeah.
that's
So
persistence right there.
yes, cheers, cheers. So we've got a number of things that we want to talk about tonight, but we thought we would first get started kind of catching up a little bit on how life has been for the two of us for the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to defer to Mimi, and you can tell us how you and the hubby and Nana's doing.
We're doing pretty good. We just got back from visiting the grandparents on Wood's side, my husband's side, and so she got to meet her other set of grandparents or another set of grandparents, and she got to meet her cousins, and it was quite overwhelming for her because she's just used to mommy, daddy, and that's all. So the kids dragged her around like a little doll and everything. So eventually she got used to them and was able to kick it a little bit. And it was interesting for us because our philosophy, or at least our stated philosophy, is that grandparents can do whatever they want to do, but it was hard watching the grandparents give her candy and chips, and we were like, but she doesn't eat that, she doesn't drink, whatever that is. So eventually the grandma was like, I know how to raise kids. I'm like,
Right.
okay, I know, but she eats organic. She really doesn't eat organic, but it's still like she only eats wheat thins. Like she doesn't eat potato chips. So that was pretty good. But other things I wrote about in the last 2 weeks, I wrote a little article about Blue Ivy and her hair and that whole debacle that was happening with her hair. And really, my point on that is one, we place way too much pressure on mothers. And, the whole Blue Ivy situation, I just kind of felt like her hair looked like what Nana's hair looks like every morning when she wakes up. So, that's probably what happened with them. Um, I wrote a little bit about receiving her redacted files.
Oh yeah.
And that kind of was a hard thing for us. So for people who don't know, redacted files are, and I think you call them something else, disclosure records.
Yeah,
What do you call them?
the disclosure records. Yeah.
But basically, they're the set of paperwork that details everything that your child has gone through as a child in the system. So it has a copy of all the court case files. It has a copy of all the monthly reports that the foster care worker has entered. It has a copy of anything related to the case that somebody has happened to file for you. And so the purpose of it is for you to read through it and to make sure you understand everything about the child before you make that final decision to go forward with the adoption. And what they're hoping is that if there's anything that you didn't know about their medical history or about any kind of abuse that you weren't aware of, or even family medical history, that you'll know that, and it'll be disclosed to you, and so you can feel a little bit more comfortable that you understand um, kind of what you're signing up for. And it really struck me that one, it's like almost 700 pages of stuff. That's a lot,
Wow.
and
That is
she's
a
only
lot.
2.5. And then um, what struck me really hard is that maybe one day she'll have to read this, right? Or
Mm.
she'll want to read it, or we'll give it to her to read. And it just really kind of hurts that she's gonna, at one point in time, you're gonna have to explain this part of the story to her. And you know, I don't know. I'm still kind of processing that. So
Yeah. Those are hard to those are hard to read. I got them when Hope was placed with me. Hope did not have 640 some pages. She
hmm
probably had maybe 200 pages, and there's a lot of stuff missing. So there's a lot of stuff missing. So it's a little hard. It is hard to kind of navigate that stuff. So. Wow.
I have Wood
Yeah,
in the background getting ice. I'm like, I'm live here right now.
we're live.
So what's been going
So
on with you the last 2 weeks? Everything on your blog has been like, I'm kicking it, I'm having a party, I'm going out. So
my blog has been like this. It's like
that is true.
it's been a bit of a roller coaster the last 2 weeks. First, we went to Disney last week. Took a vacation. It was really kind of to celebrate me finishing up my degree and finalization and all of
Well, let
that.
me let me stop.
Yeah.
Not just finishing your degree, finishing up your doctorate, you know,
Yes.
actually
Yes.
finishing your dissertation and getting your
Yes.
doctorate. I'm sorry, I had to stop and just make sure that was clear to everybody.
It's so funny. I was skimming a couple. It's funny. I've been thanks for whoever reads my blog, but it's kind of interesting some of the pages that people land on and read about, and it's kind of made me go back and look at some old posts about kind of when I was writing and before things got really crazy, and so yeah, so we were celebrating some really big stuff. And so we
Hmm.
went to Disney, and my girl's she's a West Coaster. They don't really have hurricanes and tornadoes and, the dramatic weather that we tend to have on the East Coast. And so she was not feeling it rains. It doesn't rain every day in Southern California, but it rains every day in the summertime on the East Coast.
Right.
And so she wasn't
Nobody
feeling
appreciates
that.
that.
They don't write songs about that. So she wasn't really feeling that. So Disney at first, it was a big deluge, and so we had some drama around that. But we had a really good time. Stayed with some friends. It was great. But while that was happening, in the foreground, of course, if you follow the blog, you know that the Bio family showed up and through Facebook, and I'm not going to go into too much about it right now because it's an ongoing drama. But let's just say I won't be getting any more Facebook gang requests.
Okay. All right.
So, but we're waiting. I probably will be writing a bit more about that as we navigate it. Right now, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. And then we had some drama at camp, which I told the story in no real super detail, but it was kind of really one of those times where I really kind of thought if I told my mom what happened, she would probably laugh at me. And it was such a
Why
dramatic
did you turn
episode.
into your mom at that point?
I wanted to really I wanted to go straight old school, like I'm gonna kill this kid. And I called the support group as I was kind of going to go deal with, we have the support system, 1-800 number or whatever that we can call associated with my adoption agency. And I called, and she was trying to help me problem solve this situation over the course of a couple of days. And I was like, no, I need you to, like, I'm on my way to the facility to deal with this situation, and I need you to help me not kill her when I get there. Like, I can't deal with tomorrow.
I need you to tell me over and over that I will go to jail if I do that. Please just reinforce it.
And so, it's kind of one of those things about being aware of what you need in the moment. And so she talked me off the ledge, and she was like, she's going to expect for you to come in there like raising hell, so don't. And but we navigated it, and actually it's turned out to be good. So, we're good. Tomorrow we're heading to Bruno Mars, and it's good. So, you
Hmm.
know, we're living,
All
but
right.
we're living. But I will say the last 2 weeks adoption got real.
I know it gets real right at the most inappropriate times,
It
but
gets real.
I guess that's
So
just raising children in general, right?
that's raising kids. That's raising kids. So we've got a couple of topics that we're going to talk about tonight, and the first one is the Census Bureau report on adopted children and stepchildren. And the US Census Bureau released this report in April, and certainly in our podcast notes, we'll certainly have the link to it. But if you go to census.gov and search adoption, you'll see the report for based on the 2010 census. And there was just some really interesting things on there that we're going to kind of mention. I'll talk a little bit about the highlights, and then pitch it over to Mimi to kind of see what she has to say about all of this. Oh, by the way, if you want to ask us a question, we've got the little Q&A box open, so we'll see them, and we'll try to address any questions that come up. One thing I want to mention is adoption in this report is defined really, really broadly, really fluidly. It includes formal and informal adoptions, international, private, public. It's inclusive of stepchildren who are adopted by a step-parent, whether that's legal or not, in terms of, they've gone through the legal process of adopting their stepkids. But if they say that they're their kid and they're adopted, just like an informal kinship thing, then, they check that box and move on. And it also is interesting in the report because it acknowledges that different cultural groups like African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Indigenous people in the U.S. Have a higher rate of embracing kinship and informal adoptive relationships, more so than their white counterparts. So those were some of the cool things that I thought about it. So Mimi, what'd you think about the report? Tell us some of the things you thought were most interesting.
Well, I thought that was pretty interesting. I was a bit, as I got into it, I was a bit disappointed because I said, oh, I wish there was also some information about foster children. And it made a note to say that in 2010, foster children was not a category that was included in 2010. So I felt like that was an opportunity that was missed out on gathering information about foster kids and care. But getting into it, one of the things were about the number of adopted children and stepchildren. And they said there are about 64 million or 65 million children, and 2% were adopted children. That was like, wow, that is a very small percent of adopted children out there, or people who have identified children as being adopted. So I said, wow, that's a pretty small number of people out there that we're talking about. And then something else that really caught my eye, what caught my eye too, was about the thoughts that African American and Hispanics also have a lot of informal adoption. So it might not. And I also wonder, would they just call them their kid? Would they even say that they're adopted? Would they just include them as part of their family? So
When you look at the data in the report, it has 3 categories. So it has kids that are adopted, step kids, and then biological kids. And there were a couple of things that I thought were really interesting. Kids who are adopted, or identified as adopted in the census, were more consistently, they were more likely to have consistent health insurance over the course of their life than their biological counterparts. And that may be because in the system they end up getting Medicaid, and there's certain requirements that they have to have preventive care while they are in care. I thought that was kind of interesting. They're more likely to have disabilities, most of them being in the learning and cognitive areas. African Americans actually made up, I think, 13% of adopted kids. So it mirrors our general representation in the U.S. population. This was one that I thought was really interesting because, of course, I'm a single mom, but 73% of adoptive kids live in 2-parent households, and that is a higher percentage than biological kids. So you've got the 2-parent folks kind of going out and adopting, and then there's a lot more of us single folks having kids in various ways. But of course, out in the streets, there's lots of baby mama, baby daddy, all of that kind of stuff. And so I think that certainly that's not just in communities of color. But I just found it to be an interesting stat that more of our kids, our adoptive kids, are in 2-parent homes. So,
what I saw that was interesting is that it shows that a higher percentage of adopted children under 18 were black. Then,
Hmm.
so if you look at all black children, a higher percentage of them in comparison to their counterparts are adopted. So 18%. Then the percentage of black children that were just biological children or stepchildren.
Hmm.
And what they noted was that maybe it's due because there's more African Americans, black children in foster care, which is in most cases a feeder pool to adoption. So I
Yeah.
thought that was interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see, 21% of adopted kids are in single female head of households. So, one out of every five. So just for the single folks, we're doing it too.
It's possible. I mean, I actually think that's good to know because I know a lot of people that I've talked to who are interested in adopting and who may be single women are
Hmm.
saying, well, I didn't think that I could, right? So they're either being told that they can't adopt or they don't see other people like them, and so they maybe don't want to push for it too much.
Yeah.
And so I think the numbers are saying different,
Yeah,
right?
the numbers are definitely saying different, and that was just across the board. What I also found interesting was, so that was for single women, but the overall percentage of single men, now they're single, not married. Now they did say that they might be shacking up, but they actually have a slightly higher percent of single men doing the adopting too. So, if any fellas are kind of hanging out watching this, we're doing us single folks are doing
Right.
it. So
Really.
across gender. So there were some. Go ahead.
You know what I found also? I was just looking through this data, and it also seems that adoptive parents seem to be older than in general. And so, of course, anecdotally, it makes sense, right? Because a lot of times you hear that infertility problems,
Hmm.
a lot of people come to adoption. And I'm not saying everybody, that's not everybody's calling, there's not everybody's reason, but many of the stories have some issue related to infertility, which also may be related to age, you know,
Yeah.
and so that's why a lot of people are leaning more towards adoption. And it also aligns with the fact that many of many adopted families are more economically stable,
Hmm.
um, more education. So maybe people are just
Yeah.
um, waiting longer to do the education and the work thing, and then finding out, that infertility is a problem, and then working towards adoption. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for me, that's my experience in my cohort is that, and it's interesting because I think a few years ago I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was talking about, all the highly educated folks that he knew. And I was like, yeah, well, he was like, well, the numbers seemed like bigger than the Census Bureau reports. And I was like, no, that's because we all hang out together.
Yes,
Like,
we all know each other. That's it.
educated people hang out together. And so it's interesting, even kind of looking at across the blogosphere and even in my agency and in my local community that I've kind of gotten involved in the adoption community. Folks are older, they're
Hmm.
very educated, and they're certainly more affluent. Although I did see that the number of, I'm not sure where that is. Oh, here it is. The number of adopted children that are living in poverty is still 14%.
Hmm.
So there's still, a significant amount of kids. And again, because the definition of adoption for this particular report is so broad, there's probably there's a lot of stuff in there, and a lot of different kinds of people, a lot of different kinds of salary and economic levels,
Right.
education levels, and all of that. And so, but I did find it shocking and kind of sad that so many kids are still living in poverty.
Hmm. So those are the main things that I found on here. Well, I mean, the other thing that just reinforced the fact that we feel like we're the very few voices of people of color are speaking about it is because when you look at the numbers, really, the number of householders that are really doing adoption, majority of them are white, right? And
Yeah.
so, although this is the funny thing though, we're represented, around 13%. So that means we're still in the average of how much of us are actually in the
Yeah.
general population, but we're not talking about it, right? So I
Right.
wonder why. And so that goes back to kind of why aren't people, why, and that leads into our next topic, which is, you know,
Yes.
telling people that you're adopting. See how I did that
Yes.
segue?
That was smooth. That was
Yeah.
really smooth. So yeah, this topic I proposed this topic after the last podcast. Shout out to the blogger, new blogger, future adopter, who wrote a post about how she was just, going all in, and she was going to tell everybody that she was adopting, and it seemed to be a really pleasant experience. But again, we talked about, well, do we talk about this? I mean, clearly we have to, people find out that we adopted. You just show up with a kid one day. We didn't pick
Right.
them up from the Cabbage Patch. So, is this something that we talk about, and how did we go about telling our families? So, you know, yeah.
Well, for me, I blab about it all the time, and I sometimes I think about it, like maybe you shouldn't tell everybody, but I think it would be strange for me to show up with a 2-year-old, and for the last, you know, 4 years, my husband and I have been single and happy. So, you know, I also feel like I like to get more people who look like me to be involved in foster care and adoption. So for me, it's more of a kind of a testimony. It's trying to drum up people's interest to let them know that it's available, or that, there are people that look like you that are doing it and go through it. So I didn't really have so much of a problem telling people about it. Of course, and we talked about this on the last podcast, you have to deal with the questions that come with you
Right,
telling people about it. But
right, right.
what about
So,
you?
I had been talking about adopting for probably almost a decade, and so when I finally told people I was jumping in, I don't think that they believed me, because I mean, when you talk about something for 10 years, it's like,
Right,
I'm gonna lose 20 pounds, but do you ever lose it?
right.
Kind of thing. And so, when I did tell people, it was kind of like, really, for real? I mean, it was always positive, but it was like, oh, okay. Well, and then there was this assumption, well, it's going to take forever. So, you still want to go to happy hour, kind of,
Right.
at least for my friends and that kind of stuff. I think that my family was, they were very supportive, but I do think that there was kind of a, do you really understand what you're getting into? Like, it's like a real person. And but I can honestly say that despite the fact that we certainly had numerous conversations about it, looking back, those conversations maybe didn't go so deep sometimes. And it was kind of interesting. To your point, though, I did find, as I started to tell my circle of friends, and that circle kind of started sharing, and it kind of really got out, I found out how many people in my life, my personal and professional life, were adopted. And it
That's
was a
true too.
really shocking number of people. It was a really shocking number of people, kind of just one kind of band of friends and colleagues out. There were like a half dozen people.
Hmm.
And so, it was interesting, and I guess it kind of got into that, like, well, you know now, kind of, do you tell people, what do you tell people now? I mean, because especially, and I talk a little bit about this in my blog, about same race adoption, and there's some racial privilege that comes with that, in the sense of, we pass.
Right. And I think some people would like to, right? I have some friends that adopted overseas, and I think they were challenged with people asking them about their adoption and really they were happy to move back to the States where you didn't really, that wasn't part of the, I guess, the qualifier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were same race, even though different country, but same race. And so now I could go around and nobody really necessarily is going to ask me about where does she come from or, all these other questions about it.
Yeah.
And so I think for some people that's their experience. They would like to, I guess, pass and not talk about it.
Yeah.
I wonder though if adoptees, the child, and it's hard for me to say because Nana's only 2, so she's not going to talk to me about it. They, I wonder how they feel about passing. I'm sure it's not something that they want to talk about every day, but it certainly affects maybe how they feel about themselves, maybe how they interact with other people. I don't know. So
Well, I'll share what I've observed in my situation because, I mean, Hope is now 13, and this the last 6 months in her new school, she actually was pretty transparent about the fact that she was adopted, and I followed her lead on that. Just kind of played it by ear, kind of decided who she would tell. Of course, we had to tell the folks at the school, her counselors, teachers, and those kinds of things, to kind of help us with the transition. But she did tell quite a few of her peers,
mhm,
and I think that at least my observation, it felt like she felt like she needed to explain how she got here. Again, she didn't
right,
just pop from a cabbage patch. She had a life before she came here, and for her, the move was so huge, from one coast to the other, that she really felt like she wanted and needed to talk about that.
right,
Um, I can tell you it didn't always go well. It
really,
didn't always go well, and I'm going to tell you, I've learned that I mean, I knew this before, but there's no amount of money you could pay me to go back to be 13. Like,
mhm,
couldn't do it.
yeah, it's a
um,
scary, scary time.
oh, it's terrible. But the kids really picked on her, and really, um, bullied her about, whatever happened to her biological parents that made her be here. And so, in effect, some of it ended up being, oh, well, you must have been a colossal F up because you needed to be adopted.
Uh-huh.
And it was interesting. They didn't assign blame to parents, but they assigned blame to her most of the time. And then there were other times where it was like, oh, well, your parents must have been colossal F ups, for you to be here. And it was just very hard for her, very, very hard for her to navigate socially.
Well, that's interesting because Nana's only 2.5, and she met her cousins for the first time, and I didn't really put a lot of thought into talking to our family about how to talk to Nana about it, right? Or how to introduce it to our nieces and nephews.
Mm,
I don't know. I just didn't think about it that much. Maybe, and I would say I don't think that was the right way to do things. Maybe because we're kind of isolated where we are and we don't see them that often. But while we were driving in the car and she was sitting with her 3-year-old cousin, he says, I'm listening to them and they're back there chattering in 2-year-old toddler speak, whatever they're talking. But he says, "You ain't got no mama." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "Where? Why?" And then he asked her, "Who's your daddy?" And I was thinking, what made him say that? I don't know if that's like normal toddler 3-year-old stuff that they say to each other, like, "Who's your daddy?" "That's my daddy." I don't know, because I'm not around enough toddlers to know like what they do. But it really bothered me because I wondered, like, what are the other kids saying? Like, what's the conversation that's happening around the table?
yeah.
And so when we talk
Mm,
about telling other people, and especially when you bring your child into other people's life, um, I guess we may need to be more conscious of how we what we need to, how we set the space. And I guess I didn't think about it because she's 2, and I was like, well, what's there really to talk about? And there's probably more conversation that needs to be had since you have a teenager. But now I feel like we need to set some folks down. Like, what are you guys actually saying?
Right.
Because I didn't appreciate, that backseat conversation. You ain't got no daddy. You ain't got no mama. Who knows where it came from, but
Right, right, right. Yeah, I mean it's interesting because we have a big family event coming up next week, and I haven't decided if we're going to go because it involves a road trip, and I just want to get us and keep us on schedule for the next couple of weeks. And schedule, just in case you're like in the pipeline, schedule is everything. Like routine is
mhm.
everything. But my family member called me yesterday to beg me to come, and it was like, look, you got to bring her, and she's got to meet this whole bunch of people in the family, and she was like, but just family kids are going to be there. And and I could hear this like love pain, like, please come, because we don't know
Mhm.
if everybody else is going to be, we don't know the next time when this event like
Right.
this with all of these people are going to happen, and she needs to meet her family. And there's a part of me that is like, yes, and then there's a part of me that's like, oh my god. Like, this could be
Right.
so awesome, or it could go to hell in a handbasket, like the moment we walk in the
Right.
door. you know and how do you prepare for that? Like, it's because every conversation ends up, I write a script, and every conversation, I kind of practice it, and then it doesn't go that way. So it
Right.
doesn't go.
And do you need to have a telephone conference with everybody in the family? Like, look, this is how you
Yeah.
need to approach this situation. Because honestly, I didn't think it was necessary for a 2-year-old, but now I feel like we need to have some conversations,
Yeah. Yeah.
because um, and so for something that big, with your 13-year-old, that can really be impactful, and especially if
Right.
it's a first time meeting so many people.
Yeah, so many people. And I mean, I just think about even things like the very first event that I took her to happened to be some colleagues of mine, and these are friends and colleagues, and they were just so over the moon and everything. But even things like they hug me, so they were offering to hug her, and she likes, if she agrees to be hugged,
Right.
she agrees to be hugged in a certain way. Like, there's a protocol.
Okay.
And it's based on, and it frankly is, it's just based on some trauma that she's
Mhm.
had. And so, but I can't be like, underarm hugs, ass first, underarm, ass first. And I mean, the idea of my family of telling them that, one, they need to ask for permission to show affection, and
Right.
then this is how you need to show it.
Right.
I just, I feel uncomfortable even telling them that.
It's probably, I think it creates a sense of anxiety around the situation, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How will
And
we navigate that?
yeah. And so, I have a lot to think about in the next week and a half about how we go, and, like, where is the nearest Philly cheesesteak place so that we can go and be like, this has been great. The food is awesome. Peace out.
We came
Like,
for
we
two
need,
hours. That's
we,
enough.
we drove for 3 hours to go stay for 2 hours. We're going to pick up a Philly cheesesteak on the way home. Deuces, And so, and I just have to also, that's the other thing, is that, the parent has to bear the brunt.
Right.
And so, because, and I don't, I don't know how it is in other communities. All I know is really my family, but people have stuff to say, and it's all in love. But it's like, well, why? Well, why can't I do such and such, and why can't, like, why it's got to be that way, and why did you have to leave, and oh my goodness, and like there's tears, and and it's just because people have a hard time understanding that it's not add water and stir.
Right. Absolutely.
So we've kind of slipped a little bit over into our next topic, unless you want to talk some more about telling folks that you're adopting. You have
Well,
some
I
other?
Well, I think there was another piece that you talked about, which was the cultural nuance of we don't really tell people our
Oh,
business, right?
yes, yes.
And I think that was something that future adopter was kind of struggling with. Well, I think not telling people your business, but also feeling maybe like people wouldn't be supportive of your
Hmm.
ideas. And while I didn't, well, I don't really relate with that because I feel like people would be supportive, and if they weren't, well, really worry about that
Kick
so much.
rocks.
We're pretty strong headed over here, we run this house. But I do think that there is, this kind of quietness that happens
Mm,
and that people don't really I think in general people don't talk about it, right? How many
yeah.
people in the general population just go around announcing, "Hey, we're adopting," unless they're narcissistic bloggers like us, who want to put our business out on the internet. So, when you look
The
at
head is this
we
big.
look at the census report of the number of people who are actually adopting versus the number of people who are on blogs talking about it, it's a pretty small percentage. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that's any different in our community versus just the general community.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I look at, I mean, we talked about this the last time about different support groups and I mean, and even the blogosphere that there just aren't, we lurk. I think we're there, we lurk, but we just don't say much. And so, it's a bit of a challenge. Oh, look, we have a question.
We do. So we have a question from Monique. Hey, Monique.
Hey.
Welcome to the podcast. So the question is, I'm kind of excited, like, whoa, we got a
I
third
know,
question.
we got a question. Oh my
How did you
God.
handle the discussions about the adoption process before placement? That's one of my concerns, given that placement and the process as you move towards adoption is so uncertain. Oh, okay. That's a good
Good
question.
question.
So if I understand the question right, so if not, type something else to me. type something else to us. The fact is, once you start the process, you're not in control of that. So it can take a long time, it can take a short time before you're actually placed with someone. And so how do you manage those conversations with family and friends where they're constantly asking you about, so have you heard anything? What's the next part of it? What do you do next? um, for me, that was part of the excitement, right? So I don't want to be presumptuous, but I kind of looked at it as that was my own kind of maternity process, if you look at it. So I'm going through the excitement of waiting and then the probably the angst of waiting and not hearing anything. And so that's kind of how I managed it. And I just try to inform people and educate people about the process. This is what's happening. I haven't heard anything. I'll let you know if we get a call. Certain people, I'll let you know if we get a call or what's happening. So I think people were pretty excited to walk along with us in the process. What about you? Did you?
Yeah, so I went to a support group last night, and I always end up telling the story about basically how me and Hope were like a pair of unicorns because we didn't take a very long time in our process, and from start to finish, it was less than a year and a half, and a lot of people, I imagine that when you tell people that you're adopting and then it's
Right.
like, wait, 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 because people kind of are like, oh, well, there's kids out there. How hard can it be?
Hmm.
Like, I mean, unless you're doing the international adoptions, which everybody assume takes forever, and they seem to, and are really expensive, which they also seem to be.
Right.
But domestic, if you're adopting domestically, people are like, well, can't you just go down to the Piggly Wiggly and go get you a kid? And
Right.
so, why don't you have one yet? But for me and Hope, I told certainly my immediate family knew, my circle of friends knew, and a few colleagues knew. Um, and then when I finished my home study and all of that, I mean, Hope was the first profile that I got, and we were matched within about a month. And so I knew that, I knew this thing was happening and that we would move to placement. But I told people I told more people, or more people in my family, shortly after I went to go make my first visit to her. Because it was like, okay, well, you know, I don't know what the paperwork looks like for matching anywhere else, but it was like, yeah, you seem like a good, cool chick.
Let's do this.
Let's do this. And, then it was all about figuring out when I would go out to visit, when phone calls would start, when we go out to visit, and those kinds of things. And so that I didn't have a long period of time between when I told people and when there was really something to talk about. Like I could see her, could send pictures, well, not many pictures, but I could at least
Hmm.
share some pictures with my immediate family and those kinds of things. But for folks that are waiting for a really long time, I my sense is that there probably is some fatigue on both sides,
Yes.
some fatigue about being asked about it because it seems so painful for a lot of families because they're waiting for so long, and fatigue for the people that are supporting them, like it hasn't happened yet. Is this really happening? Well, what's
Like,
wrong
what's
with
going
you?
I
Did you
agree
have?
with that because I remember there was this time in my process in our process, where we had finished the paperwork and I, we had turned in, we had gotten our license. And I was like, yes, we got our license. And I expected, I'm like, well, we are us. So this should not take, I mean, I should be getting a call next week. And I'd read on blogs where people would get a call for a child like in a week or so. I was like, okay. And then we didn't, and I had told everybody, like, okay, get ready for this. I'm ready for my baby shower. So, y'all need to
Right,
start
right.
preparing. And nothing happened. Really, nothing happened. And I wanted to have a child in the house by Christmas. Nope. Thanksgiving went by, Christmas went by. And so I agree with you. There does become to get some fatigue. People stop asking. People
Yeah,
stop asking. But again, this is your process. It is, and it can be somewhat a lonely process. And that's where you need your support groups. You need other people that are going through the process at the same time to be happy for you, to have the same angst, because even when you actually tell someone, hey, I got a call, I'm going to be put in a RAS or something like that, people are like, I don't know what that means. Like, am I supposed to be happy for you or not? So you really do need
yeah,
some other people on your side that understand the process and can go through it with you. And
yeah,
we're here, so
yeah,
let us
yeah.
know.
Yeah, keep on blogging, and we're following. We're following. So we some parts of this telling people conversation, we've touched a little bit on kind of what's normal or kind of the new normal without
Right.
needing without needing. Um, but what's the new normal, and as adoptive families, will we ever be normal? And certainly there's like in same race adoptions, you can kind of pass. Nana is so young
Yep.
that there will be people that come into your life that really just assume that she is your biological child, and then there's the whole nature versus nurture thing, and the influences that we have over our kids, at least by nurture. But what is the adoptive family's version of normal, and is there a time when we don't have to disclose, when we don't have to tell people?
Well, if I don't think you ever necessarily have to tell anybody anything about your family, right? So when we meet new people, I wouldn't necessarily say, "Hey, this is my adoptive daughter. That's my child.
Right.
That's my daughter." And I don't need to put a qualifier on it. However, when we say normal, I guess I think adoptive family is just always going to be part of our normal. The same way African American is part of the qualifier of our family, the same way, um, if we had any kind of disabilities in our family, all of these things, you know, wherever we live, Midwesterners, all these things happen to shape, our sensibilities, the way we do things, our outlook on it. So I don't know if there's ever going to be, um, I guess I wouldn't even maybe use the term normal. It just is what it
Mhm.
is. So we're always going to be looking through things through that lens, and it's different for every family. So another family may be looking through the lens of autism. Another
Yeah.
family may be looking through the lens of middle classness or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
suburbia. There's all these different things that kind of impact the way that you view your family. And so maybe by kind of making adoptive versus normal a dichotomy, we
Mm.
might be doing a
Mhm.
disservice to ourselves.
Mm. It's a great perspective. I think that I struggle with this not because not with colleagues and friends and those kinds of things, but with schooling, certainly for us that disclosure was really important. And she's doing well academically and that kind of thing, but just behaviorally, we've really struggled. And even this week with the episode that we had with the day camp that she's in, and I had to like go down there,
Go regulate. Go regulate some things on everybody's part.
on everybody's part. Um, but it was interesting because I hadn't disclosed that we're an adoptive family and that we're a new adoptive family. And when she started the camp, and I found myself having had to disclose it this week, and it was interesting because these are also educators, and it just hadn't occurred to me that I probably needed to tell them that going into the process. But it was like I literally saw the light bulbs come on, and they were like, oh. Well, that
Mhm.
explains a whole lot about what happened in the last couple of days. And so there's the disclosures that, of course, that are necessary in order to advocate for your child. Um, and I guess I'm finding that in our social systems, I'm finding the need. And I hate like saying, okay, well, this is our explanation as a crutch, but I'm like, there are just some behavioral things that we're still really kind of working on that I end up having to disclose in order to add context to the situation to help folks help me make it manageable.
Right. And I guess if I understand what you're saying, is there ever going to be a time where we can just walk around in the
Yeah.
world without having to think about adoption? And there was a blog that someone wrote about this. And did I find the blog? It was on adoption.net. And it
Mm,
was called Taking the Adoptive Qualifier Out
yes.
of Parenting. And
Yes.
so she talks about this, and like I said, I'm not sure if I agree with it, but she says that now she's a transracial. They're a transracial family, so of
Mhm.
course what she says is when they venture out to the park or get ice cream or stand in line, they're often reminded that the children are not biologically ours. We're used to the predictable questions, the second glances, and the compliments. We've heard it all and seen it all. When these things happen, we are reminded that we are different, mainly because they're a transracial family. But
Mm.
she says our differences do not outweigh our normal. Adoptive parents need to know that it's healthy and permissive to be just parents, minus the adoptive qualifier.
Yeah.
So, first, you need to, and these are the reasons she gives. First, you need to be able to live free without explanations or excuses or justifications. So, you're your child's mom or dad, period. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't have to qualify that this is my adoptive child. That's just my child.
Right.
Um, Second, you need to know who you are because society will question your intentions, your choices, and your validity as a parent of a child who was adopted. Um, she goes on to talk about the qualifier of um, adoptive is used in media, usually when you're talking about celebrities, and it also
Mm.
makes adoptive parents made out to be, the saviors. So she just says that it's detrimental to go around, and it's detrimental to the adoption community and triad members, because when people hear that a person's adopted or that you're an adoptive parent, they already have some notion in their mind about what that means, and stereotypes because of what's portrayed in the media. And
Mhm.
then lastly, you need to grasp and embrace that adoption once finalized or made official. It's a past action. A
Mm.
child whose adoption who has been finalized, it is a child who was adopted, not a child who is
Is
adopted.
wow.
Well, I was good with the first two things she said, but the last one, I don't know, because um I also read a blog, and I'll have to find it. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes. A blog by an adoptee. And she was talking about this whole thing about is adopted versus was adopted. And again, it goes back to the fact that it just because I what the past action, you make it sound like this happened and now I never have to think about it again. However, for an adoptee, adoption impacts all. There's loss associated with adoption,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm never going to just be like, this happened. Like I broke my leg and that was it.
Yeah.
It healed
Right.
and I'm done. I don't have to refer back to it again or not. No, it's part of who I am. And so it's really going to have an impact. Now, how much that impacts each person is very personal, and it's probably a spectrum. But I don't know if I agree with just saying once you're adopted, that's a past action and we don't have to refer to it
Talk
again.
about it anymore.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that either. I think that it is a past action, but but coming to make a family that way is different. And I had in some of our prep notes kind of, even thinking about us as parents, how would we have prepared differently?
Right.
If you read our blogs, you realize that both Mimi and I are dealing with kids that are teething.
Yes. Which is crazy because they're like 10 years apart,
They're
12
10
years
years
apart.
apart. And I just remember when I read your blog about like she's 2 and she's teething, and I was like, we don't know nothing about birthing no babies. So it's like, because I mean, a couple weeks ago, seriously, like the science teacher was like, no, Miss Graham, I'm sorry, Miss so and so, Miss ABM, that these are 12-year molars, and so yeah, it was crazy. So
But do you
how
think
might
it's
we
because how do I say this? Have have we been fully integrated into the parenting society? I mean, we just popped up with some children,
yeah.
right? So it's not like we have a group of other mothers that we can be like, yeah, so and so's teething. I don't have anybody really that I'm talking to about those things where I would just pick up naturally because I know some other parents whose children are a little bit older than mine. People aren't I don't necessarily have that type of network, so I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah,
What
I
about
think
you?
that I think that no, I don't have that network. I mean, I just think that we're kind of winging it,
Right.
and one of the things that I did, this kind of was adopted, is adopted. I need to chew on that a little bit more because I'm not sure how I feel about it, because I do think that I mean, it was an action, and we celebrate it for us. It's a very recent action, but I mean, it's not over. Like, it's
Right.
not over. The transition is still very much a very real thing for us. Maybe in a year or two, it really will be a past action, but it's still a very real process for us right now that doesn't allow us to totally remove the qualifier at this time.
You know, I think about it in some ways. Like I grew up without a stable father figure. And so that could be you're grown, get over that. But it does inform how I view relationships. I remember it having a very strong impact on me when I was in college and I needed, my car broke down and I was like, man, it'd be nice if I had a dad that I could call and have them talk to the people at the mechanic shop. So I do feel like I think it is something to continue to chew over, but I do think that even those things that impact us and they may not have the same kind of terminal quality as the word adoptive, they continue to impact our lives all through it,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Well, normal apparently is overrated anyway, so there you go.
Exactly. We're the new normal. How about that?
We're the new
That's
normal.
what
We're the
it is.
new normal. Well, we have a few minutes left, so now is time for our recommendations.
All
Woo,
right.
woo, woo, woo. These are things that we've learned and picked up on our short journeys that we decide to think is important. Maybe they were aha moments for us. Maybe they might be aha moments for you too. Mimi, what you got?
Well, I have a couple of things. One of them is the foster parenting podcast. So, when I started looking into foster care, there's a podcast that I found on iTunes. It's called Foster Parenting Podcast. The hosts are Tim and Wendy. And I think if you're interested in doing foster care, and they talk about foster care from the point where they, I think, got their license to the point where they actually adopted a child. And then they had some other co hosts that came on to talk about different aspects of foster care. They don't post anymore, but the
Mhm.
archive is there, and I think it's a great, if you're interested in really understanding kind of all the steps involved, it's a great podcast because they do a good job of being very strict about what they talk about, being very specific, and laying out all the steps for foster care. So that's one. And then the other thing I found was, since I have a 2-year old, I can't listen to everything that I want to listen to in the car. So I found these things called Rockabye Baby, lullabies of hip hop. And so you can go see them on, you can go find it at rockabyebabymusic.com. And they have like Jay-Z, they have Kanye West.
Really?
Yeah, they do. And I said, well, let me see if I can play just a little bit so you can, feel kind of what I'm dealing with over here. So I'm gonna just play just a snippet so people can hear it. So can you hear that?
Nope.
No?
Okay, I hear something. Are you over there jamming by yourself?
I'm jamming by myself. Okay, so if you cannot get it, but you can go onto YouTube, look up Rockabye Baby, Kanye West, or Rockabye Baby Jay Z. I was over here like do 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 do. Mm-mm. So anyway, it's a straight instrumental. So go look it up.
Awesome. Now I'm gonna be on YouTube all night. So my recommendation this week is, and I wish I had pulled it off the refrigerator, but we have a couple of magnets, those magnets with the faces on them, and it's the How Do You Feel Today with
Ooh.
all of the different emotions. And this was actually Hope's idea because we were really struggling with some stuff this week about how were we feeling about things that were happening in the house. And, she said, I'm going to go get this thing because, I mean, I've had them on the refrigerator for years, long before she came into my life. And she pulled them off the refrigerator and it was like, I feel like this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And then she was like, how do you feel? And I was like, I feel like this and this and this and this and this.
I mean, how detailed
And
are
this one
these
and this one and this one.
faces? But
Well, you know what? Okay, I'm going to just run and go get it and hold it
go
up
get
just
it because I
one
need to
moment.
see it. So while she is running, I wish I could make this work so you guys can hear my little song.
All right.
Okay, she's back.
Okay. Whew. I'm back. I'm back. So, I don't know if you can see that. Can you see it?
Put it up a little bit closer.
So,
Okay. Yes.
okay. You kind of get a sense of that. These are the How Do You Feel? And they come with these little things. You can probably get them on Amazon, I'm sure, or somewhere. And it has the How Do You Feel Today
Mhm.
there. And so this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one has 30 different emotions. Um, but not to be outdone, we've got another one that has another like 20 some because we are very emotional at this house.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings over there.
We are in our feelings, honey. And so, and it was really interesting because we put them on the table as we were talking, and we were like, well, I feel this way and this way and this way. And you know, it was really interesting for us to kind of, for her, it was great that she came up with this idea to use this because a lot of times, and I don't think that we realize this even as adults, that we're not really just feeling one emotion. We're probably feeling like 12. And usually there's a dominant emotion that kind of, you know, like anger is usually wrapped up in a whole bunch of stuff. So is grief. And so being able to kind of parse through the different components was really, really helpful for us. So definitely I would recommend you go on out and get you a how do you feel today magnet for your refrigerator.
I'm going to get
like
one
us.
for Wood and I. You know, how do you feel? This is how I feel today.
You know, I think it's probably great for any relationship. And so get that, slap it on the refrigerator, put it on the bathroom mirror. There you go. So there's my recommendation for the week. Very, very helpful in our house this week. So looks like we are at 11 o'clock. So that was fun, and it went fast.
That was fun. How can people find you?
So you can find me on WordPress at Adoptive Black Mom, WordPress.com, and on Twitter, the Twitters at Adoptive Black Mom. And you can also reach me by email at adoptiveblackmom@gmail.com.
Yes, and you can reach me at complicatedmelody with an I. .wordpress.com. You can read the blog. You can email me at complicatedmelody with an I at gmail.com, and you can find me on the Twitters. I started to tweet a little bit more.
I saw.
I know. At Mimi Complex. And so we hope to see you guys in another 2 weeks. Tell people about it. Tweet about it. Let people know that we're out here talking about adoption, foster care, and communities of color, and we hope to see you guys in another 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Have fun and have a great couple of weeks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.